the harassment of the Philippine Coast Guard vessel, this is not just an harassment on the Philippine government. This is actually a mockery to the international law, to the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea.
What does it mean for a small coastal patrol boat to stand its course when a much larger vessel cuts across its bow? In the West Philippine Sea, this is no longer a hypothetical question. It is a daily reality. As dawn breaks over contested waters, Filipino sailors, fishermen, and Coast Guard crews operate under constant pressure, fully aware that a single maneuver, a single miscalculation, could echo far beyond the horizon. This is not just a maritime dispute. It is a test of resolve, legality, and national dignity. The West Philippine Sea, part of the broader South China Sea through which more than $3 trillion in global trade passes each year, has become one of the most closely watched geopolitical flashpoints in the Indo-Pacific. Chinese Coast Guard vessels patrol aggressively, maritime militia swarm disputed features, and water cannons replace warning shots. These are gray zone tactics, actions calibrated to intimidate without triggering open conflict. Yet for the Philippines, the consequences are anything but abstract. Fishermen are driven from traditional grounds. Resupply missions face obstruction. Sovereign rights recognized under international law are challenged in real time on real waters. What makes the Philippine case distinct is not merely geography, but response. Unlike some Southeast Asian states that have opted for quiet accommodation or strategic ambiguity, Manila has increasingly chosen visibility and law. Where others remain silent, the Philippines files diplomatic protests. Where others de-escalate through disengagement, Manila documents incidents, releases footage, and invokes international rulings. This contrast matters. Vietnam fortifies quietly. Malaysia avoids public confrontation. Cambodia aligns politically. The Philippines, by comparison, has taken the harder path, absorbing pressure while insisting that rules, not power, must govern the sea.
All we are doing is resupplying our fishermen, protecting our territorial rights. Again, it will be provocative, it will be seen as an escalation. We don't do that. The Philippines does not escalate tensions. Why the opposite? The Philippines always tries to bring down the level of tension.
At the heart of this stance is a simple but profound choice: to defend sovereignty without militarizing the dispute, to resist coercion without provoking war. By anchoring its strategy in international law, diplomatic signaling, and strengthened alliances, particularly with the United States and regional partners, the Philippines is attempting something rare in modern geopolitics. It is showing that a middle power, even under sustained pressure from a far stronger adversary, can stand its ground without abandoning restraint. This is the story of how the Philippines is navigating one of the most dangerous waterways in the world, not with bravado, but with persistence. Not with force alone, but with principle. And in an era where might often seems to make right, that choice may prove more consequential than any single encounter at sea. For the Philippines, the dispute in the West Philippine Sea did not begin with warships or water cannons. It began with maps, coastlines, and rules agreed upon by nearly the entire world. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, coastal states are entitled to a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone, measured from their shores. For Manila, this is not an abstract legal concept. It defines where Filipino fishermen can work, where energy resources may be developed, and where the state exercises sovereign rights. The West Philippine Sea falls squarely within this framework, anchored to geography, not ambition. China's claim follows a very different logic. Through the so-called Nine-Dash Line, Beijing asserts historic rights over nearly the entire South China Sea, an area stretching thousands of kilometers from the Chinese mainland and overlapping the EEZs of multiple Southeast Asian states. Unlike UNCLOS-based claims, the 9-dash line is not tied to coastlines, distances, or modern maritime law. It is deliberately vague, historically selective, and strategically expansive. That ambiguity has been its strength, flexible enough to justify patrols, pressure, and presence without ever clearly defining legal limits.
The new government here in Manila is grappling with what might be called catastrophic success. What comes next is obviously going to be a delicate balancing act. It is a time for cool heads, and Manila is sensibly, I think, being careful not to flaunt its legal victory. It's very important at this stage not to do anything that could give China a pretext for escalation.
This clash between law and assertion came to a head in 2016. In a landmark case brought by the Philippines, an international arbitral tribunal operating under the Permanent Court of Arbitration issued a sweeping ruling. The tribunal concluded that China's historic claims had no legal basis under international law, and affirmed that features such as reefs and low tide elevations could not generate expansive maritime entitlements. Just as importantly, it upheld the Philippines' sovereign rights within its EEZ. For Manila, the ruling was not a victory lap, it was a legal anchor. For Beijing, it was rejected outright. What followed revealed the deeper pattern. Rather than retreat, China accelerated its presence. Over the past decade, submerged reefs and coral outcrows were transformed into artificial islands, complete with runways, radar systems, missile shelters, and hardened facilities. These were not civilian projects. They were permanent fixtures of power projection, designed to normalize Chinese control and shift facts on the water faster than diplomacy or legal mechanisms could respond. Each new structure quietly altered the balance, turning contested spaces into monitored, defended zones. This history matters because it explains the present moment. The Philippines is not reacting to a sudden crisis. It is responding to a long-running strategy that blends lawfare, infrastructure, and coercion. And unlike states that have chosen silence or accommodation, Manila continues to point back to the same foundation: geography, international law, and a ruling that still stands, even if one side refuses to acknowledge it. In an era where rules are increasingly tested by power, that insistence has become an act of strategic resistance in itself. The importance of the West Philippine Sea is not measured only in nautical miles or legal charts. It is measured in movement. Every day, some of the world's largest container ships, energy tankers, and bulk carriers pass through these waters. Linking factories in East Asia to markets in Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. More than $3 trillion in global trade flows through this corridor annually, making it one of the busiest and most consequential maritime highways on the planet. Control, influence, or disruption here does not stay local. It ripples outward, affecting supply chains, prices, and economic stability far from Southeast Asia. This is why the West Philippine Sea carries weight far beyond Philippine shores. What happens here shapes the broader security environment of Association of Southeast Asian Nations, where smaller states closely watch whether international law can still protect them from coercion. It also directly affects extra-regional powers. For the United States and its allies, freedom of navigation through these waters underpins military mobility and commercial access. For the European Union, whose economies depend heavily on uninterrupted maritime trade, instability threatens economic exposure. In short, the West Philippine Sea is a pressure point where regional disputes intersect with global balance. Yet the most immediate impact is felt not by strategists in capitals, but by fishing communities along the Philippine coast. For generations, Filipino fishers relied on these waters as a source of food and income. Today, many report returning home with empty nets after being crowded out by larger foreign vessels, or deterred by the constant presence of Coast Guard ships. The numbers reflect that reality. The West Philippine Sea's contribution to the country's total fish supply has reportedly fallen from around 7% to 5%, a seemingly small shift that carries serious consequences for food security, prices, and rural livelihoods. For coastal families, geopolitics shows up not as headlines, but as lost income and uncertainty about tomorrow's catch. Beneath the surface lies another layer of strategic value: energy. Geological surveys suggest that the seabed of the West Philippine Sea holds potential offshore oil and gas reserves that could help reduce the Philippines' long-standing dependence on imported fuel. For a country vulnerable to energy price shocks, these resources represent long-term strategic insurance if they can be accessed and developed responsibly. But exploration itself has become politicized. Survey ships are challenged, projects are delayed, and uncertainty discourages investment. What should be a question of energy planning has become entangled in power competition. These factors explain why the West Philippine Sea matters so deeply and why Manila's stance resonates beyond its borders. This is not simply a territorial dispute over distant reefs. It is about who gets to fish, who controls energy futures, and whether global trade routes remain governed by rules or by pressure. The strategic significance of these waters lies precisely in that convergence, where everyday livelihoods, national resilience, and international order all meet in the same stretch of sea. Faced with sustained pressure at sea, the Philippines has chosen an approach that is deliberate rather than dramatic. Diplomacy remains the first line of response. Manila continues to work within ASEAN to keep the dispute anchored to international law, consistently emphasizing adherence to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the 2016 arbitral ruling. This is not easy diplomacy. Consensus within ASEAN is often slow and uneven. Yet the Philippines persists because multilateral visibility limits China's ability to isolate or quietly pressure individual states. When incidents occur, Manila does not let them pass unnoticed. Diplomatic protests, formal demarches are filed with regularity, creating a documented record of coercive behavior. These protests are not symbolic paperwork. They are strategic signals that incidents will be named, recorded, and internationalized. After confrontations near Sabina, Philippine officials were unusually direct. Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro described Chinese actions as dangerous and inhumane, showing that restraint does not mean silence. The message was clear: pressure will be met with exposure, not acquiescence. Behind the scenes, legal preparation continues methodically. Philippine government agencies now operate on the assumption that documentation itself is a form of deterrence. Incursions are logged, radio challenges recorded, video footage preserved, and incident timelines reconstructed. This evidence feeds diplomatic engagements today and preserves options for legal action tomorrow. The lesson of 2016 was not that courts solve disputes overnight, but that law provides leverage over time, especially when power asymmetries are sharp. At the same time, Manila has moved to narrow the gap between legal position and physical presence. Military and maritime preparedness have accelerated, particularly for the Navy and Coast Guard. Patrols have increased. Surveillance coverage has expanded. The goal is not escalation, but persistence. To ensure that Philippine vessels remain present in waters they are legally entitled to operate in. This presence is reinforced through regular joint exercises with allies, most notably with the United States during Balikatan. These drills improve interoperability, signal alliance credibility, and quietly raise the cost of coercion without firing a shot. Equally important is the domestic front. The Philippine government has invested more effort in public communication, briefings, footage releases, educational campaigns aimed at building national understanding of maritime rights. This is not propaganda, it is resilience building. When citizens understand why distant shoals matter, political resolve becomes harder to erode. Public awareness turns external pressure into a shared national issue, rather than a niche security concern. Taken together, the Philippines' response reflects a strategic posture shaped by realism. Manila cannot outmatch China ship for ship, but it can outlast coercion by combining law, alliances, documentation, and public resolve. It is a strategy built for endurance rather than headlines, and in a dispute defined by patience and pressure, that may be the most effective response of all.
Sa ngayon, nagbuga na naman ng tubig ang water.
The dispute in the West Philippine Sea has steadily evolved from a bilateral tension into a regional litmus test. Within the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, Manila has emerged as one of the most vocal advocates for unity against unilateral changes to the maritime status quo. The Philippines consistently pushes the idea that silence only accelerates normalization of coercion.
Nabidyohan ko po, nabidyohan ko.
Yet ASEAN consensus remains fragile. Several member states balance maritime concerns against deep economic ties with China, making collective action uneven and often cautious. The result is a region aware of the risk, but divided over how openly to confront it. Beyond Southeast Asia, the implications widen quickly. The credibility of international maritime law is at stake, particularly the principle of freedom of navigation. In response to expansive claims, the United States and like-minded partners continue to conduct freedom of navigation operations, challenging what they describe as excessive maritime assertions. These patrols are not about territorial ownership, they are about precedent. If restrictions imposed in the West Philippine Sea go unchallenged, similar tactics could appear elsewhere, from the Indian Ocean to critical choke points in Europe. For this reason, developments off Philippine shores are closely monitored in Washington, Brussels, Tokyo, and Canberra. Despite its principled stance, the Philippines operates under clear constraints. Militarily, the imbalance is stark. China's Navy and Coast Guard possess far greater numbers, larger hulls, and more advanced systems. This reality limits Manila's ability to rely on unilateral force and reinforces its dependence on alliances and partnerships for deterrence and strategic depth. Presence can be sustained, but escalation control requires external support. Diplomatically, the balancing act is equally delicate. China remains a major trading partner and investor, giving Beijing economic leverage alongside maritime pressure. Philippine policymakers must therefore calibrate responses carefully, asserting sovereignty without triggering economic retaliation or closing diplomatic channels. This is not appeasement, it is risk management in an environment where missteps carry national consequences. At home, expectations are rising. Public awareness of maritime issues has grown sharply, fueled by media coverage and official disclosures. With that awareness comes pressure. Citizens increasingly demand visible protection of sovereignty, even as they fear the costs of open conflict. Political leadership must navigate this tension, projecting firmness without feeding instability and resolve without recklessness. Looking ahead, Manila's strategy points toward endurance rather than sudden transformation. Defense and surveillance enhancements remain a priority. Investments in maritime domain awareness, radar coverage, unmanned systems, satellite integration, and upgraded Coast Guard assets are designed to improve visibility and persistence rather than provoke confrontation. The objective is simple: to know what happens in Philippine waters and to be present where the law allows. Diplomatically, the Philippines continues to press for a binding code of conduct in the South China Sea, even as negotiations move slowly. At the same time, Manila is deepening strategic relationships beyond its traditional ally. Ties with Japan, Australia, the European Union, and the United States are expanding across defense, capacity building, and political coordination. This diversified network reduces over-reliance on any single partner and embeds the Philippine position within a broader coalition of interest. Equally important is sustainability. Fishing communities remain on the front line of this dispute, and long-term resilience depends on balancing access, conservation, and economic opportunity. Protecting marine ecosystems while adapting livelihoods to shifting realities will be critical, not only for food security, but for maintaining public trust in national strategy. The West Philippine Sea represents one of the most serious sovereignty challenges the Philippines has faced in recent decades. It is a contest fought simultaneously in courtrooms, diplomatic halls, fishing grounds, and open waters. Through a combination of legal persistence, diplomatic engagement, alliance building, and measured readiness, Manila has chosen a path that resists coercion without abandoning restraint. As tensions persist, the Philippine approach reflects a clear calculation that defending national interests does not require abandoning international norms, and that power alone should not determine outcomes at sea. The West Philippine Sea remains a test of sovereignty, of diplomacy, and of collective resolve. It is a test the Philippines continues to meet not with escalation, but with steady determination anchored in law, partnerships, and national will. If you like the video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for deep analysis of contemporary issues.